Hi, it's Jenni Smith. Welcome to our Splendid Sampler to Sew Along. This week's block is Fashionable Pineapple by the lovely Jane Davidson, who runs this project with Pat Sloan. I said in my little teaser video that actually P is for pineapple and also for persistence, because I was kind of quite keen to give up when I'd done one of the first little squares here. I thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. And then I got a rhythm, I found it much easier, and it's really good practicing when you've got so many different squares to complete. My daughter, when I showed her this, absolutely loved this block, and I was thinking it'd be a nice one to size up as well, maybe to do a cushion with little buttons instead of the French knots in the centre. So I'm really pleased with the end result, and I figured out quite a few tips and tricks, especially by stabilising the background and how in which order to applicate onto the background so that you can remove the freezer paper easily. So watch through the video and let me know what you think. So the first step that I have done is actually just put the pineapple design against my windows. I don't have a light box, and I have traced the designs through. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to then, so obviously it's now reversed, and I'm now going to trace the front of the pineapple onto some fusible web. So I've got some heat and bond. So it's flipped in orientation now, and I'm going to trace through, and then I'll show you what to do next. I have cut this out now exactly to the size, and I'm going to iron it onto my pineapple fabric. So I've got this golden Liberty English Garden print onto the wrong side of the fabric, and then I'm going to cut it out, leaving a 1/4 inch seam just on the fabric, which will be turned under later. Okay, so you can see that I've got a seam allowance now around the edge of the pineapple. The instructions say scant 1/4 inch. And then what I've done is that within each of the holes in the pineapple, it also says to cut out those squares, leaving a scant 1/4 inch seam and then snipping into the corners. So I have drawn those lines in, and before I peel off the back of the fusible heat and bond, what I'm going to do is now go in and cut each one of those smaller holes away. You can see that I can fold the pineapple just to be able to get in on and make that first snip, and then you need some good small bladed, sharp to the tip scissors. Embroidery scissors would be brilliant. So you can then go around and just cut those holes first of all. So now I have a holy pineapple, and what I'm going to do is, keeping the paper on, flip this over and just do it here, and then I'm going to snip from these corners into the corners of each square, and then I'm going to peel the back layer of the heat and bond away, so that I'll be able to fold those flaps underneath and press them from the right side to stay in position, hopefully. This is a new technique I am experimenting with, so we'll see what happens. The underneath of the pineapple, so what becomes the background, is I'm using a dark green. This is the wrong side of it that you can see here, but I also thought, because it's got quite a lot of stitching and French knots coming through it, that it would be helpful if it was lightly interfaced, and that also makes transferring the design easy. So what I've done is I have first of all traced the design through the paper so that it's the reverse way, and then I have simply copied that onto this light interfacing. And now I'm going to put this onto the wrong side of my fabric, which is this green here. I did just put the dots in, wondering if I could be clever and align these to make a pattern with the flower, but I think that's one step too far. But what I'm going to do is iron this interfacing. It's lightweight, so it doesn't alter the feel of the fabric, onto the wrong side, cut out the background of the pineapple. You don't need to add any seam allowance onto this, and then I can start to build up the layers ready for stitching. So I've now got my interfaced pineapple background, and it's right side down onto the front of the pineapple. This seam allowance here hasn't got the glue on, so that's good for when I need to turn that under. That's my scant 1/4 of an inch for when I put it onto the background square. And what you can do now is you can lightly glue this down around the edge, just like it says you can use applique glue, but you've already got the layer of glue in there. And then you can go in and work your way around now with your needle and a fine applique thread and turn back these squares. The snips are already in place, so you can simply turn them back and create each one of those designs. This sheet here that you've removed from the heat and bond is actually quite useful as well, because as you're now hand sewing those squares, you can, if you flip it onto the reverse, you can have it over the design, and then you can just keep track with what size you need these squares to be, obviously once they're folded back, but you can still see the original line through, and just make sure that your design is staying accurate for when you turn it onto the background. The pineapple leaves I'm going to do with the freezer paper method, so I've literally just traced the shape onto the dull side of some freezer paper here. The orientation is correct as it is on the pattern to then be flipped on the final piece, even though it's pretty symmetrical, so it's not a deal breaker if you do that the wrong way around. But I have just copied it onto the paper, so I can now cut it out, iron it onto the wrong side of my leaf fabric, and then cut out a scant 1/4 inch seam again, so that works fine for the needle turn when I get to that point. So I've got the pineapple here now, and actually it's good because I've just been able to press slightly around the shape because I've got the interfaced pineapple background as well, so I've given it a little press which will act a little bit like freezer paper and just giving you that shape for when you needle turn it. And again, I've got now the pineapple leaves on the freezer paper ready to needle turn. So the next decision is the background colour, and like always in lots of these blocks I try to make this decision as I go along rather than opt in for something at the start. So obviously it could work here against a cream background as it kind of says in the instructions, but then I'm thinking maybe I should do something different, because I also think when I'm doing these videos, if I do something different, it gives people another point of view as well and another idea. So again, I've got the, sorry I'm one-handed, but I've got the navy here, all this denim blue. All the liberties are busy, but I think that's okay because this is quite a large motif, so I think a little bit more going on behind is okay. And then there's this pink, and actually I think this is the one, this is the fruit silhouette from Liberty's Orchard Garden, and I think that's the colourway I like the most. So I can now cut my background square, which is 7 inches, and start to pin this in position and baste it and applique. Just in terms of placement, I have just put my 6.5 inch square ruler on the top, so I know I've got that additional 1/4 of an inch all the way around, just so in case it frays when I'm stitching it in place. But also you then want to check that once you lose another 1/4 of an inch seam allowance when you actually sew this block in the quilt, that you're still clear of the edges of your pineapple. So if anything, like on the diagram, you've got a larger area of empty space down in this bottom right hand corner. And so now I'm going to just hand baste it in position, which is what I like to do, and then I can go in and needle turn it. And what I found is that obviously a good thread match is going to really help as well for disappearing as I stitch this in place. So I've basted the pineapple in position. I've just stopped at the top curves and also then stitched the pineapple leaves down. So I've left the top edge of the pineapple open because I'm going to go in and needle turn around the leaves, and then because I can remove the basting stitches if I don't stitch the top of the pineapple up, I can then slip out the freezer paper at that bottom gap before finishing off the top of the pineapple. So it's quite late now, so apologies that it's a little bit shadowy filming, but I have managed to stitch around all the pineapple leaf, and then you can just see that because the top of the pineapple is open, as I said earlier, I've just been able to ease out the freezer paper there. It came out in 2 pieces, but once I've taken the basting stitches out from the centre, then it just eased out. So now I can go and just finish off around the pineapple. For the finishing touches, the French knots, I'm using the Orifloss. I've taken 4 out of the 6 strands and put it onto my needle, and it's just a case of, I've just done the first one there. I'm not going to sew off each one because actually I figure that it's fine if I've got a little link on the back until I run out of thread, and also if you continue in one onto the next one, it probably makes it a little bit stronger. So it's a case of coming up in the centre of the next square here, not pulling it too tight at the back, and then wrapping around the needle. I'm doing 3 on this one, and then going back in where you came up and just gently now pulling it down like so, and then I can just move around the continuing. Okay, so I've done all the French knots now. I think they really do make a difference. I really like this bright green, it really pops forward. For the final press, when you've got embroidery thread, you should not press directly onto that, so I would always flip over and just press from the back. You can see there how I've joined the French knots. I'll just trim that, but just got those little leads. So I can press, and then your background square's a little bit bigger so that it didn't, to allow if it frays whilst you're doing the work on it. So I'll just trim that down now to 6.5 inches and it's done. So here we go. I think it's a good 4-hour block, this one, with all that hand sewing as you go, but the French knots are quick and the leaves there look good. I'm quite pleased with that. That's an oak shot fabric that I used, that just another pattern print just would have been too busy. The Orifil floss, definitely nice for French knots. I use 4 strands. It's a 6-stranded cotton, but I just took 4 out for my knots and did 3 twists. And this pom-pom flamingo here is what my son Ellis made whilst I was hanging out in the studio doing this. I thought it kind of fit in nicely with the tropical theme. So there you go. I hope that's been helpful. It'll be lovely to hear what you think, any tips, what you find useful, and if you want to subscribe to the channel too. Thank you.